Today, we're diving into one of the shortest chapters in the Quran, Surah Quraysh. It's just 4 verses long, but trust me, it packs a universe of meaning about everything from economics and security to what it really means to be blessed. We're going to find out how a tribe, literally on the brink of starving to death, became a regional superpower, and how a tiny, almost invisible detail in its script reveals one of the Quran's biggest secrets. So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with a surprising detail in the text itself, then we'll jump back in time to see the harsh reality of life in ancient Mecca. We'll look at the brilliant economic solution that saved a people, understand the incredible blessings they were given, uncover the ultimate reason behind it all, and wrap it all up with a powerful lesson in trust.
All right. First up, we're putting on our detective hats and zooming in on a fascinating clue, one that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. Honestly, most people who've read this chapter 1,000 times have probably missed it.
So let me just ask you this. What if a tiny little inconsistency in how a word is spelled could actually prove how the entire Quran has been perfectly preserved for over 14 centuries? I know, it sounds like a crazy claim, but let's look at the evidence right here in this chapter.
Okay, take a close look at your screen. The key word we're looking at is itlaf, which means something like a deep-seated familiarity or a cherished custom. Now notice in the first verse, it's spelled with that little letter ya. But then in verse 2, the ya is just gone. It's not there. But here's the kicker. Even with that difference in spelling, every single reciter of the Quran on earth pronounces them exactly the same. So what's going on here? And here is the big reveal. This isn't a typo. It's a signpost. This tiny little difference in the written text, combined with a totally unified pronunciation, is one of the most powerful proofs that the Quran's authority doesn't come from the ink on the page. It comes from the spoken word, from an unbroken person-to-person chain of memorization going all the way back to the Prophet Muhammad himself. The recitation tells you how to read the text, not the other way around. Now, to really get the meaning of this chapter, we need to understand the world it was revealed in. So let's talk about the people at the center of the story, the tribe of Quraysh, living in the city of Mecca. The name Quraysh itself is packed with clues. Some scholars say it's just the name of an ancestor. Others say it comes from the word for a big fish, like a shark, that dominates the sea, which kind of hints at their powerful status. It can also mean wealth, or even the act of gathering people together. Each one of these meanings tells us a little piece of their story. And remember that word alaf we were just talking about? This is where it gets really important. It's not just a habit. It's that deep comfort you feel in a routine you grow to love because it's just part of who you are. And as we're about to see, the Quraysh had gotten very, very used to some pretty major blessings. But things weren't always so comfortable for them, not even close. This quote is from the prayer of Abraham, centuries earlier when he first left his family in the Valley of Mecca. That's the foundation of the city, a barren, desolate valley. No rivers, no farms, absolutely nothing that would make you want to build a city there. And because of that brutal environment, famine was a constant, terrifying reality for the Quraysh. But here's the thing. At the same time, they were a people with immense, almost unbelievable pride. And that combination of deep poverty and sky-high pride created a truly desperate situation. It got so bad that it led to this tragic, heartbreaking tradition. When a family ran out of every last bit of food, their pride was so huge that they couldn't stand the shame of asking their neighbors for help. So instead, they would take their children, go into a secluded tent, and just wait to die. They literally called it the tent of death. That's how dire things were in Mecca. So how in the world does a tribe on the verge of extinction, literally starving in tents of death, become the most powerful and respected tribe in all of Arabia? It all started with one man's brilliant, game-changing idea.
That man was Hashem, who was the great-grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad. He saw his people starving, and he got them all together and proposed something revolutionary. He said, look, this every family for themselves thing isn't working. His idea? They would pool their resources. Some men would travel on trade journeys, and whatever profits they made would be shared with all the families who stayed behind. It was basically a cooperative that saved an entire people.
This system became incredibly organized. They had 2 massive caravans every single year, and it was pure genius. In the winter, they'd head south to the warmer climate of Yemen. In the summer, they'd go north to the cooler lands of Asham or Greater Syria. This biennial journey became the beating heart of Mecca's economy. And within just a few generations, everything changed.
These caravans weren't about desperate survival anymore. They became a source of incredible wealth, status, and convenience. The Quraysh went from being isolated and starving to the undisputed masters of trade in the entire Arabian Peninsula. This became their ilaf, that comfortable, prosperous routine they had grown so incredibly fond of.
So the caravans solved the hunger problem, but the blessing from God didn't stop there. He gave them something even more valuable in the lawless, dangerous world of ancient Arabia: total, unshakable security. The Quraysh basically had the world's best passport, with 3 layers of insane protection. First, you had the sacred months, 4 months out of the year where all fighting was forbidden across Arabia. Second, Mecca itself was a sanctuary. Even a wanted man was totally safe once he crossed into its limits. And third, the Quraysh themselves were seen as a sacred people. Because they were the caretakers of the Kaaba, nobody would dare attack their caravans. They could travel with tons of wealth and nobody would touch them. So this brings us to the absolute core of the chapter. They were saved from hunger. They were given complete safety from fear. But why? What was the whole point of all these incredible, tailor-made blessings? The Quran gives the answer in one direct, powerful command. For all of this, for the safety, for the caravans, for the food that ended their hunger, and the security that ended their fear, the one and only thing asked in return was this: let them then worship the Lord of this house.
And that's the central message, right there. The wealth, the power, the security, that wasn't the end goal. That was all just the setup. God provided everything they could possibly need, removing the distractions of being hungry and scared, all to create the perfect environment for one single purpose: the pure, focused worship of the one true God, the Lord of the Kaaba.
Okay, to wrap this all up, let's look at a moment in history that put this entire principle to the ultimate test. A moment where the people of Mecca had to choose between their economic survival and their faith in God's promise. So when Islam came to Mecca, there were 360 idols in and around the Kaaba. The entire Meccan economy, their whole business model, was built on pilgrimages to these idols. So when the Prophet Muhammad conquered Mecca, he destroyed every single idol and announced that non-believers could no longer come for pilgrimage. From a business perspective, this was a catastrophe. Their entire economy was wiped out in a day. The people were terrified. Their livelihood was gone. And in that moment of pure economic fear, this verse was revealed, making a direct promise to them. And if you fear poverty, Allah will enrich you from His bounty. It was a direct challenge. Are you going to trust in your old system built on idols, or are you going to trust in the promise of the Lord of this house? They chose to trust. And you know what happened? The very next year, 100,000 Muslims showed up for the pilgrimage, way more people than had ever come for the idols. Their greatest perceived loss became their greatest gain. The business they thought they had lost was replaced by something infinitely bigger and more blessed, and it continues to this day. And it leaves us with a really powerful question to think about in our own lives. When is trusting a promise, despite your fear, led to your greatest gain?